are, in fact, at the end of Revelation chapter 2. This is the third letter to the third church of the seven of them. The letter to the church in Pergamum, or some people say Pergamos. If I go back and forth between those two, forgive me, they're the same thing, all right? So let's read Revelation chapter 2, beginning in verse 12. Write this letter to the angel of the church in Pergamum. This is the message from the one with the sharp two-edged sword. I know that you live in the city where Satan has his throne, yet you have remained loyal to me. You refused to deny me even when Antipas, my faithful witness, was martyred among you there in Satan's city. But I have a few complaints against you. You tolerate some among you whose teaching is like that of Balaam, who showed Balak how to trip up the people of Israel. He taught them to sin by eating food offered to idols and by committing sexual sin. In a similar way, you have some Nicolaitans among you who follow the same teaching. Repent of your sin, or I will suddenly come to you and fight against them with the sword of my mouth. Anyone with ears to hear must listen to the Spirit and understand what he is saying to the churches. To everyone who is victorious, I will give some of the manna which has been hidden away in heaven. And I will give to each one a white stone, and on the stone will be engraved a new name that no one understands except the one who receives it. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. So, I think as we're getting into these letters, we are hitting a place where it's like, there's a lot in that letter that I really don't understand, John. What in the world are you talking about? Where is Satan's city? How about let's not ever go there? And who's Antipas? And what is the teaching of Balaam and Balak? And I mean, you start asking so many questions that this is kind of one of those places in the Bible where I think we get a little frustrated, a little discouraged. We turn the page and go, I don't know. And then that's when you kind of come to me and you're like, this all kind of scares me a little bit. I mean, Satan's city and the sword of my mouth, and I don't know. So what I'm not going to do this morning is comb through this word by word and give like a specific instruction for each of these sentences. We could take time to do that, and a Revelation Bible study is a great one to get into to kind of unpack all the little specifics that have to do with this letter. What I'm going to offer instead is kind of a more holistic high view of this letter to say, if we were listening to this letter in our context today, here's how I think Jesus would say the exact same things, using references and words that would make sense to us. These listeners, when he said things like Balaam and Balak and the two-edged sword, they went, oh. And they didn't know that 2,000 years later we'd be going, oh, I don't know. So let's just say it the way we would say it, okay? And receive the message that is true and eternal from Jesus, who is still writing letters to his church.
Pergamos is the third city and is located north of Ephesus, about 15 miles inland from the Aegean Sea. Pergamos means elevated, and it sits at an elevation of around 1,000 feet. Due to this natural elevation, it was considered impregnable, with many kings depositing their treasures here for safekeeping. Lysimachus deposited a treasure here estimated to be $10 million worth. It also had a library to rival the world-famous Alexandrian library and contained 200,000 volumes according to Plutarch, and was also the seat of the Roman province's Supreme Court. The introduction of Jesus is again fitting and relevant. Jesus is introduced as the one who has the sharp sword with two edges. This broad, two-edged sword was an emblem of the highest official authority, and the proconsuls who ruled in this area were vested with this symbol of their authority. Jesus tells them, I know your works, where you dwell and where Satan's seat is. Pergamos was the center of Satan's religion. When the Persians overthrew the Babylonians, the defeated Babylonian priests later led a revolt, but the Chaldean priests had to retreat and fled to Asia Minor and fixed their central college here in Pergamos. This religion is based on the claim that they provided a bridge between heaven and earth. The ruling monarch had many titles, one of which was Pontifex Maximus. Pont means bridge, factio means make, and Maximus means the greatest. Put together, it means the greatest bridge builder. When Caesar became emperor of Rome and Pontifex Maximus of the world's religion, it signified a connecting link between the two Babylons, between ancient and modern, literal and spiritual, with Pergamos playing a connecting role between the two. They are commended for having the faithful martyr Antipas, but they are rebuked for having those who hold the doctrine of Balaam. Here is a prime example where Revelation packs a whole lot of meaning into certain words or phrases. In order to understand the wider context, you have to go and read Numbers 22 to 24, where a king called Balak tries to pay Balaam to curse God's people. He is unable to curse them, but he enjoys the monetary rewards. Then, when unable to curse them, he tells Balak to get them to sin by enticing them with sexual immorality and food offered to idols, a plan that worked. The saying goes, if you can't beat them, then join them. Because Satan couldn't defeat the church during the time period of Smyrna through persecution, he instead decided to join. We take the time period of Pergamos to be from around 320 or 330 to 538 AD, which coincides with the professed conversion of Emperor Constantine. Before a battle with Maxentius, he says he saw the symbol of a cross in the sky and heard the words, "By this sign you shall conquer." He took this as a sign to convert, and Rome went from pagan to papal, from paganism to professed Christianity. Now a danger far more insidious than the flames of persecution existed. Half-baked Christians, wolves in sheep's clothing, people who said they're Christian but still continued certain pagan practices, but with new names or alleged meaning attached. Many people were happy at their newfound elevated status, but this marked the beginning of a separation between the compromised majority and the maligned and persecuted minority. Not everyone who says they are Christian is a Christian. Today, in order to overcome compromise, we need what was promised Pergamos, the hidden manna of God's word. May we be faithful to God and cling to his word and its principles and not sway for popularity and favor with men.
So, as I understand the type of place that Pergamos was in ancient times, it was a place of very elite people. It had temples to nearly every worshipped god at the time. And then you also heard that there was a large bank there as well as a large library. So regardless of if you worshipped a god or you just worshipped money or you worshipped learning, you could come to Pergamos and find other people who had similar affections as you. Not only that, but if you needed something, if you needed what a certain deity offered, or you needed more money, or you needed more understanding, you could, the idea was that you could go to Pergamos because that's where dreams were fulfilled. The more that I read about Pergamos, the more I imagined it was a place like Los Angeles, where everybody has a dream. And you go there because, you can find all the answers to all your dreams. And when you bring that many kind of diverse people seeking such huge diversity in what would fulfill the human heart, then all of a sudden you have a very large place filled with lots of different kinds of people, and you can have a Rodeo Drive and a Hollywood Boulevard and a Skid Row all in the same place. And that's kind of the place that Pergamos was. So it was very exciting and also a little scary and also a lot of fun and also a place that if one of our children said, I'm running away to LA, we would be like, ee, right? Like, we would hope they'd be okay, but gosh, it would all be awfully frightening to send your children there without a plan, just chase your dreams. But somehow, in a community like that, there's this little church hanging on for dear life. In a place where everyone is trying to fit in and keep up and make a name for themselves so that they could climb the social status, that kind of attitude is always going to create a community where you have the haves and the have-nots, right? Because I can only know that I'm making it when I compare myself to somebody else. It's not a community where really generosity and hospitality and compassion can come out because I need so badly to climb on the heads of other people so that I can get ahead. And so there's a diversity, but it's not beautiful. It's a separation. It's not a unity or a harmony. It's a separation of people where those who didn't have what it takes were kept apart from those who had it all. And sometimes the stakes were really, really high. You heard him explain how the governors or the leaders of that place talked about the authority they had as the ones who wield the two-edged sword or the double-edged sword. This may shock you. I know nothing about swords. I know. You're looking at me and you're thinking, you really look like someone who has a lot of swords. And I do actually have a lot of swords in my house. They're actually called sabers. They're lightsabers. A huge collection of them. I'm not allowed to wield them because I don't know what I'm doing. But I really don't know anything about swords. So, here we go. One slide for me, Ricky. This is my best attempt at explaining a double-edged sword. So my understanding is this is a very large object, quite heavy and sharp on both edges, a broad sword, so that as it is wielded, which would be very difficult for someone with not strong arms like me, it can kill this way and kill that way. It doesn't matter which way you wield it. It is a killing machine, and it is best used to sever the head from the body. Lovely. I know. Yes, lovely. So when a leader of a community of people looks over his subjects and says, I wield the double-edged sword, it's not a warm fuzzy. It is, I have the authority and the power to take your head off. So you best do it my way. So what does Jesus mean when he says, it is from my mouth that comes the double-edged sword? So the governor of Pergamos tried to intimidate the Christians by beheading Antipas. Antipas gets this one mention in Scripture, but obviously, go Antipas, right? Obviously, he is a leader among this community of people in Pergamos. And the governor at that time decided, if I cut off the head, the body will die. Only what he's forgotten is that's already been tried in Christianity. That's what they tried to do with Jesus. If we cut off Jesus the head, then the body will die. Only in Christianity, the opposite happens. You cut down the head, but the body flourishes. It rises up even more beautiful because death has never had the last word in our story because our head has overcome death. And so that's what Jesus is reminding this community. It is terribly, horribly sad that Antipas has lost his life. Jesus says, I know. I suspect that he wept with that community when Antipas died. But he said, don't forget. This was not a demolishing of the community. This is how the message continues to spread. But then Jesus also says to this community, whatever power your governor thinks he wields by his actual sword. Make no mistake, mine is bigger. Mine is stronger. I don't need a sword, says Jesus, made by human hands. The very words of my mouth contain life and death. It has been my choice to speak life into the existence of the universe, and it will be my choice when I use my words to end the story. I contain the keys to hell and death. I am the beginning and the end. That's what Jesus means when he says, it is from my mouth that the two-edged sword extends. But then he also warns that this sword won't just be used to separate eternally those who have persecuted Jesus' followers, those who have been the most cruel and have done the most heinous things to these other people. But it would also be used to separate those who follow Jesus faithfully from those who were unfaithful. And Jesus again points out these Nicolaitans as examples. Again, this is a community of belief and understanding that we don't bump into in our everyday lives, so we don't read the word Nicolaitans and go, ooh, but we should. So let's practice. I'm going to say Nicolaitans, and you like clutch pearls. Ready? Nicolaitans. Ooh, right. We're so good at that. That was fun. Okay, so Jesus points out these Nicolaitans as examples. The temptation that's provided by the Nicolaitans was a secularized alternative spiritual experience that permitted the Christians to behave like all the other people. In other words, they were saying, you can believe in Jesus and you can also act like all the other people, and it's fine. No, it's fine. Don't worry about it, because here's what we know. The Christians were not supposed to go into the temple of Athena or Zeus or da-da-da or da-da-da. But the Nicolaitans came in and said, no, look, here's the thing. We know that if you don't show up at those temples, then the people recognize that you're different. And being different means you don't get to do business, you don't get to buy, sell, or trade. You're going to lose access to healthcare and education. You're going to be so marginalized as a people group that you won't be able to actually function in society. So tell you what, just make an appearance. Just show up in the temples, do the thing, but like cross your fingers and in your heart don't really mean it. This truly was the advice of the Nicolaitans to the Christian community. Live in both worlds. Which to our postmodern ear sounds like, that's not bad advice, right? You get along to get along. Be very tolerant of all the things. These were their friends, their coworkers, even their family. So what was wrong with showing up at these temples where they weren't supposed to be? It was about what was going on in the temples. Because it wasn't just a place where you could show up, make an appearance, and then head back out again. It was the way that worship happened. In some of the temples, the way you worshiped was to have sex with priests and prostitutes there. In other places, you ate food that had been prayed and danced and sung over and dedicated to another god. There were activities that happened in these temples that marked people for the worship of other gods that were less than Jesus. And Jesus said, I need you not to do that. I need you to live a life that's distinctive from that. I need you to live differently. Because here's the thing, your friends, your family, your coworkers, they're going to spend their life, their money, their time, their energy, their soul in the worship of these other gods, used and being used until they get to the end and find more hopelessness because there's no life there. And they're going to look around and say, Where's the light? Where's the hope? And I need you to be the light. I need you to live a life that's different from the life that they're living. I need for you to live in the world in a way that's not using things and using people and using commodities in a selfish and lustful way. I need you to live in the world in a way that's generous and compassionate and loving. Not seeking worship for what you can get to make a name for yourself, but seeking to worship the one whose name is above every other name and the one that says, give yourself over. Surrender, sacrifice for the sake of the beloved. It was an entirely different way of living, and Jesus said, you can't straddle. You can't do both. It's just not going to work because they need you to be different until they have the courage to also be different. So, in the invitation to be distinctive, to be different, the Christians knew that they were going to be ostracized. They knew that these choices meant that other people would look at them and say, you're not one of us. They would look at them and say, you don't get to come do business here because whatever accusation they might make. In that day and time, it was lots of different things. They were considered cannibals because they ate and drank the flesh of Jesus at their communion table. Or they were considered atheists because they didn't believe in the pantheon of gods. Or they were considered traitors because they refused to say that Caesar is Lord and Jesus is. But in that ostracizing, Jesus said to them, I'm going to give you a different kind of invitation. And so this is the part in the letter where Jesus says, I am going to the one who overcomes, I'm going to give the secret manna and a white stone with a name that nobody knows written on it. And I don't know about you, but every time I've read that paragraph, I've gone, I don't know. That one just sails right past me. The other ones, I can kind of understand it. You know, you get the crown of victory, you get the tree of life, like I'm getting that. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with the white stone until I learn this. In a society, an elite society, imagine again with me a Los Angeles, and some premier party is happening, and everyone are in their beautiful dresses and suits, and they're walking down red carpets, and the only way that you get in the door is to have the invitation, right? And we all know that the fancier the shindig that we're invited to, the fancier that paper is. You know what I'm saying? Like some of us, we send out party invitations and we use just plain old Xerox paper and we photocopy it, you know? And if we're really fancy, we do it in color, but most of the time it's just black and white. You know what I'm saying? But like if you get an invitation in the mail where that paper, you know, it's hard, like you can, you know, it's not bending, and it's embossed in some gold lettering. Like that's fancy, right? But then if that invitation has your name on it, right? I mean, because that's not just sent through some printer where everybody gets the same one. That is like a special for you invitation. Turns out we haven't changed in over 2,000 years. So there wasn't paper going on back in this day. What did they have lots of? Rocks. I'm about to tell you a story, and you're going to be like, Leanne, that is an episode of Fred Flintstone. But this is how it worked. To create invitations for these elaborate parties that they would chip off pieces of stone and write a name on there, and that was your ticket into the party. Now, of course, if you don't have lots of resources, you just go collect whatever rocks you can to write the invitation on and distribute it to the people that you want to come. But if you're fancy, if you can throw a really nice party, Well, your rock is white because it's a special kind of rock. And so these very elite parties with a very specific guest list would go out on white stones with a family name on it. And that's how you got into the party. And so when Jesus looks at these Christians, whom he has just said, I need you to be different. I need you to not try to fit in with everybody else, because there's going to come a day when they need a way out, and you've got to be the light for them. I know I'm asking you to do something that is just impossible. But to the one who overcomes, I am setting a table of manna, which would be the bread of heaven, which would be all the provision that we need. And I'm issuing you a white stone with your name on it. Last year, last spring, Zoe's show choir, the show choir that Zoe sings with, performed a number where they, after reflecting on how hard 2020 had been for them as a group, as students, they wrote on white T-shirts a word that revealed the struggle of the year for them. And it was powerful for those of us sitting in the audience, watching them sing and dance with this word that reflected their struggle. It was raw, it was vulnerable, and it was real. And as parents sitting out there in the audience, all we could do was watch. And I don't know how many of the other students, for us, it was a first time revealing. I didn't know what Zoe and her friends were going to reveal on their shirts, and all you could do was sit and watch and receive as they said, this is how I feel. This is my label right now. It was tough. But what I would want those students, as well as all of us who feel like we are defined by our hard days, those of us who feel like we have to wear some kind of scarlet letter or branding, for those of us who feel like we have to put on display what is most vulnerable about us on a regular basis and how hard that is. I want to say that you don't have to be defined by your worst moment. That there is a name that you were called by the one who created you. There is a purpose for your life that was created for you before you drew breath. There is a way that God is calling you to live in the world that goes above whatever labels other people may put on you or that you put on yourself. This is not an invitation from Jesus to be elite. It is an invitation from Jesus to join something eternal. And there is a precious name that each of us is called: holy, righteous, redeemed, overcomer. I hope that's the name that you can receive about yourself.